Donald Trump announced during a meeting with the National Space Council that he wants to initiate a sixth branch of the United States Armed Forces, which will be a Space Force. The following clip is basically all he said about the Space Force during the meeting. Roll it.
We are going to have the Air Force and we are going to have the Space Force, separate but equal.
What he focused on during this meeting was his vision to reignite America's involvement in space exploration for the purpose of scientific and economic benefit. I'm going to first focus on why President Trump has a bold vision going forward with American space industry, and then later in this video, I'm going to focus on Trump's initiative to start a sixth branch of the United States Armed Forces, which will be a Space Force, and I'll focus on the implications of that development. His stated vision for the American space industry could be preparation for the coming UFO disclosure. The Pentagon is well aware of the technological breakthroughs that will inevitably manifest in a post-disclosure world. On October 11th, 2017, Luis Elizondo announced to the world that he was the former head of a UFO program in the Pentagon and that the UFO phenomenon is absolutely real.
It was in this position I learned that the phenomenon is indeed real.
On December 16th, 2017, the New York Times published an article going into detail about the UFO Pentagon program and also published 2 Department of Defense released gun camera videos of UAP. And then again on March 9th, the Washington Post published a 3rd Department of Defense released gun camera video of yet another UAP. All of these developments have been stemming from the government's green light to move more quickly into a post-disclosure world. Secretary Ross of the National Space Council talks about some of the technological endeavors that will be surfacing with the aid of Trump's new space initiatives.
These efforts and others to come from President Trump and the Space Council will make new activities in space possible, but only because of the ingenuity and innovative spirits of the people in this room. Non-traditional activities like space tourism, asteroid mining, space manufacturing, and lunar habitation will soon become a reality.
Beyond that, there are going to be medical technological advancements as private industry ventures into space much more frequently. Here are the goals of John Villinger of TechShop to further medical technology through space exploration.
One of our most exciting projects focuses on 3D bioprinting in space with the goal of manufacturing human tissues for patients here on Earth. Right now we are building the TechShot biofabrication facility, which will launch to the International Space Station early next year. We will start with simpler tissues such as patches that can help heal damaged hearts and steadily increase in complexity until we are biomanufacturing whole organs from space. The bioprinter may also play a critical role in deep space exploration, where it could be used to make food items or function as a compounding pharmacy, enabling the remote formulation of drugs optimized for each crew member.
John Villinger goes on to explain that bioprinting in the microgravity atmosphere of space is far easier than doing the same thing within the Earth's atmosphere. In addition to all this, Trump wants to establish a permanent base on the moon, and not too long afterwards, he wants to have a manned mission to Mars. So what is propelling Trump and the National Space Council to talk in depth about all of these technological advancements that they anticipate are going to take place, as well as a further dedication to space exploration? Well, you could cite the explosion of the privatization of space with actors like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, who are intent on making breakthroughs in space exploration that could very well lead to a reduction in the costs of going out to space by a factor of 10. But it's also possible that the proposed new focus on space exploration by Trump and the National Space Council has a much more profound and exciting undercurrent to it. And that is that the United States is going to demand a new approach to space exploration with the advent of new exotic technologies that are going to emerge as we move into a post-disclosure world. It's very possible that the US military has sequestered away various exotic forms of propulsion and energy creation during the truth embargo that they felt was inappropriate to bring to the table during the truth embargo, that they will have emerge onto the scene once we enter a post-disclosure world. And even if that does not end up being the case, I believe that as we passage into a post-disclosure world, all of the scientists of the world are going to say the following in unison. How do these UFOs have such ridiculously amazing flight profiles? And further, how can we duplicate their capabilities? And with that new frame of mind that all of the world scientists are going to adopt in a post-disclosure world, I believe that alone will be enough to lead to incredible scientific breakthroughs in energy creation and rocket propulsion. Very excitingly, in a post-disclosure world, we are going to enter a golden age of space exploration, both on the federal level and also the private level. In Trump's meeting with the National Space Council, one of his vows was to remove unnecessary regulations so that private space and industry could thrive without any unnecessary roadblocks. If indeed private space industry is given the keys to the kingdom of how to access, let's say, zero-point energy, well then, we could in the very near future be entering a world in which space tourism becomes as commonplace as those that travel to the island of Hawaii. Now, let's focus on the implications of Trump's announcement that he wants to implement a sixth branch of the United States Armed Forces, which will be a Space Force. In a recent interview on CNN, link in the description, Neil deGrasse Tyson explained that the Army birthed the Air Force 70 years ago when the Army began to realize that their capabilities were improving and that warfare was going to progress from being exclusively on the land and sea and enter into airspace. With that realization, it became sensible for the Army to create the Air Force. And one could argue that as we technologically progress, it may be a very sensible thing to do to create a whole new force called the Space Force that focuses exclusively on space and in no other arena. Of course, the United States already has a Space Force, except that the Air Force is the entity that is in charge of all space capabilities. And basically what President Trump wants to do is take away that jurisdiction from the Air Force and give it to a singular force, which will become the sixth branch of the armed forces, the Space Force. Personally, I don't have a strong opinion about it. It really comes down to the following question. Is it an advantage for the United States military apparatus to create a whole separate branch that focuses exclusively on space, or would that cause more problems than it would solve, and it's just better to leave everything as it is and allow the Air Force to continue taking care of all space capabilities? Secretary Jim Mattis opposes the creation of a sixth branch of the military that would become the Space Force. From TheVerge.com. In a letter to the Committee on Armed Services, Mattis argued that it would just create more overhead and bureaucracy. And here's what Senator Bill Nelson thinks about creating a Space Force. The president told a US general to create a new Space Force as sixth branch of military today, which generals tell me they don't want. Thankfully, the president can't do it without Congress because now is not the time to rip the Air Force apart. Too many important missions at stake. That's really all I gotta say about that. I'm not a general, I'm not in the military, so I'll leave that to them. on what's best to do. But I want to touch on one last thing. I sense that some people perceive the initiative by President Trump to create a sixth branch of the military, the Space Force, is somehow an earlier indication that the government is going to start talking about evil aliens and is going to tell the United States that we need a lot more funding so we can fight the evil aliens. And I think this is just absurd. And the reason this is absurd is because if we were to deal with extraterrestrials that are thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of years ahead of us, regardless of whatever one of those applies, they would have technology where they could potentially, and perhaps most likely, have military infrastructure literally light years away, and because they're so much further advanced than Earth technology is, they could utilize weaponry, maybe scalar weaponry or laser beams, whatever exotic technology they have, and they could literally take out all of Earth's infrastructure in space, all of it, simultaneously. So I don't anticipate this fictional narrative that the government of the world or the US government is going to start creating another boogeyman in space. Because ultimately there is no viable defense against a warring civilization that is so much further ahead of us and will perpetually have the high ground because they can be so far away out in space and yet still harness their weapons and still destroy our planet and our military infrastructure in the Earth's atmosphere or orbiting the Earth. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you'd like to support this channel, you could check out my merch shop. Link is in the description, or you could even become a patron, or you could just slap a like on this bad boy and I will appreciate it so much. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.